Hi, Dave from Informed America, back talking to people from around the world about how they're dealing with the impact of this coronavirus pandemic on the community and culture. Today I welcomed Gaby Pena, coming to us from Paris, France, and she talked about her experience living through this pandemic and lockdown in the city for about 3 weeks with not a lot of end in sight. She also talked about her work at the International Rescue Committee, where they help those who have been displaced by wars, disasters, and now those people are dealing with a pandemic. So we talked about the impact on that community as well. In addition to this, reporting on the on-the-ground situation in Paris, we also talked about maintaining your sanity during a lockdown, which is something I know a lot of us are struggling with. So with that, let's take it away. All right, well, I want to thank my guest, Gaby Pena, for coming on. She's coming to us all the way from Paris, France. Now, I just talked to someone from Shanghai, China, so on that end of the world, and now we're getting a perspective on what's been going on with the coronavirus and its impact on the community and culture around the world. So it's great to talk to you, Gaby. I really, really appreciate you coming on to have a bit of a chat.
Thank you for having me.
Oh, no problem. So it's the afternoon in the United States. Time changes always fascinate me. So what time is it in Paris?
It is 9:03 p.m.
Excellent. So I can do that math quickly to say you are 6 hours ahead of me. So that's great. Again, appreciate you taking the time out of your night. I want to know what's been going on. Well, first of all, how long have you been in France, and how did you get there?
So I moved here in January.
Okay.
I got this job opportunity to work remotely, and my boyfriend lives here, and I thought, what a great time to move to France.
Well, sure.
At
least it wasn't a good time to move to Wuhan, China, right? So it could have been that.
Yeah. A lot of changes in a very short period of time. Mm-hmm. So thank goodness I'm working remotely. So it wasn't a complete, shock in terms of my work environment.
Yeah. And I understand you work for the International Rescue Committee as an education in emergency coordinator. Do I have that right?
Yes.
So what is that job? What does the International Rescue Committee do, and how do you help do further whatever that goal is?
So the International Rescue Committee is an international NGO, nonprofit, and we work in crisis affected and also in conflict zones. We provide health services, education, economic recovery, as well as child protection, and also support to women's empowerment. So we do a lot of things, and mostly working with displaced populations. So our response to COVID has been up our alley in terms of what we do, but still a shock in terms of how unprecedented it's been.
Yeah, no, certainly. So we're talking about refugees, people displaced by war, natural disasters, that sort of thing. Okay.
Yeah.
And what would a normal sort of a thing be when there isn't a global pandemic? So you're making sure that if there are minors, they're not being abused, trying to find homes for them, stuff like that,
I think it depends on the nonprofit. For my position specifically with education, we do education programming. For example, in Lebanon, we work in non-formal settlements. Mm-hmm. So we create these safe and healing classrooms for Syrian children who may not have access to public education, or who need extra support in catching up to those curriculums. So we ensure that our programs basically address their needs and their learning needs as well. And
that's excellent. So that would have been the typical thing, but now that all that I'm assuming has gotten kind of thrown upside down with this global pandemic going on. So what has been your focus since you're able to work remotely? What has been your focus for those who are in need?
So because essentially our work basically derives from interacting one-on-one with people and having that community approach, we've had to basically create a quick response to how we ensure that we engage with parents and teachers and children. So some of the things we're doing is looking at technological ways to keep in touch with them, to condense the materials that we use, so that we can, let's say, send a story every day through WhatsApp for parents, or give them tips on what they can do at home with their children. There are also parents who may not have high literacy skills. So we ensure that the content we're giving them or the information is something that, they can do at home with their children, as well as providing accurate information on how to, hygiene and all of these things, because unfortunately there's a lot of information out there. Not all of it is accurate.
Oh yeah. I mean, I would imagine that it's exacerbated in those kinds of communities where they really don't know who to trust, what to read, what to believe. But even for us, I mean, there's always there's lots of stuff going on about this thing. What would work? What might work? What drugs might work? Should I do this thing? Should I Lysol my face every day or something? How do I protect myself? And it's very difficult for all of us. So that's critical for those kinds of groups. And you're doing this? Have you noticed that are they responding? Are they have you been able to get through and be able to actually help them through this?
So honestly, a lot of it is contextual. Each country is pretty much going to have it be in a different phase of COVID, right? Mm-hmm. And so the needs are very different. But as I mentioned, in some countries, like Lebanon, for example, the response from the government has played also a big part in how communities are able to respond and what services are provided to them.
What's going on in Lebanon?
So in Lebanon, for example, the Ministry of Education has launched like an online learning platform. Our team specifically are using low tech to be able to access the people that we serve. Also in Uganda, for example, the Ministry of Education has drafted their response towards how they're going to adapt education programming. So one of the things that we're going to see is also radio broadcasting, which is where lessons are given via radio, and families are given a radio at home for their children to be able to take classes. Mm-hmm. So we're starting to see some conversations and then also steps forward. Unfortunately, a lot of this also depends on funding. So we're also in advocacy mode to ensure that donors understand the need to support us in shifting funds, but as well as providing like new sources of funding so that we're able to respond to COVID.
And where does that funding typically come from? Does it come from governments, or do you have a number of individual donors as well? How do you typically fundraise in order for you to help these people in need?
Yeah, there's a variety. So USAID is the foreign funding source from the US. Mm-hmm. Then there's DFID from the UK. So we do have a lot of support from government donors, but most importantly, we also have like foundations that support us, as well as private donors. There are also individual contributions that can be made on IRC's website. So we're able to, kind of pull funding from these different sources to also support our programs in this crisis mode to access funds immediately, while we kind of wait to see what new pools of funding come up.
Great. Well, I certainly hope everyone steps up. And for anyone who may be interested in the international rescue community, head onto that website and donate. If this is something that if you to support the work that Gaby's working so hard at to help, my goodness, I couldn't imagine what all these families are going through, trauma in their lives, and then basically, one thing on top of another. It's you definitely can feel for these people. Well, I really appreciate you talking about that and talking about the work you do. I'd like to just know a little bit about what else is going on with you. And we talked about how people are in sort of different stages of this thing. And it seems like Europe is a little bit ahead of the United States, but by just a bit. And again, I was talking to Lauren Hogan from China, and China is basically, they seem like they're over that curve and they're on their way down and they're recovering, but not yet for us. So I'd like to know what's going on the ground. I understand you've been locked down for a while. How long have you been locked down for?
I actually asked my partner right before the call, and I was like, I think I'll be asked this, but I don't remember anymore.
Is it a year? Is it a decade?
It was, I believe, the second week of March.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. I tell my friends back home, I'm originally from Florida, what it's like, because right before the lockdown, basically the government was just saying, like, please, stay home, just be wary, be mindful, in hopes that, people would take to that advice. But it's Paris, so that didn't happen. People were still at bars,
Do what I want.
just packed together and not doing that, not taking that guidance. So it honestly happened one day to the next, which,
really?
Wasn't really the best thing for everyone, especially there are a lot of people in Paris who are external, they're expats, there are international students here. There are also people who live in the South or in the North and needed to find a way to get home immediately. Thank goodness for us, like, we were able to just stay in place, but it really did happen from one day to the next. And what that entailed is basically you can go out, but you needed to have basically a paper that you printed out. Now it's mobile, but in the beginning you print out a paper, and you kind of check off what you're going to do, whether it's work, grocery shopping, or a quick run around the block.
Sort of like a hall pass, right?
Yeah, exactly. And I really didn't think anybody would get stopped, but I saw a couple of folks being stopped just to ask. So it was being, kind of monitored.
I did hear a funny story that some people were actually dressing up as police officers and then harassing people for being outside. I guess presumably to check that paper, that hall pass, to see if it was valid. Have you heard that too?
I haven't heard that. I'll think twice now.
I know. Well, you better be careful. They're going to be checking you for your papers.
I'll think twice now, especially now that we're using our phones to save paper and not, continually print.
Yeah, certainly, and that's good. So you're able to at least leave to go get some food, work if you have to let you run around the block. That's good. And so over here, I'm in the Florida area as well. I'm in the suburbs of Clearwater, and we've been on, I wouldn't call it a lockdown. It's almost like, non-essential businesses shuttered, but it's been very broad. It's mostly just people being sent home from work and large businesses. So traffic is down, but some things are still open. You can go out and do things. They have this thing about gathering with 10 people or more you can't do. So they've banned all that. But luckily, well, I mean, I don't know what's better or not, but here it has, we're not in a city, I guess is my point. If we were in New York City, it might've been a bit stricter. I'm assuming, or actually, I'll just ask you, is this lockdown extend to the whole country, or is it just the major cities?
It's the whole country.
Oh, wow. Okay. So if you're out there in the country, you still need that permission to leave, huh?
Yeah, I actually have a friend in the country. She doesn't really carry the pass because people really just don't congregate there. I think for me, honestly, I found the lockdown to provide stability. Right before things happened, the usual of there being nothing at grocery stores, people were hoarding. And that was very scary because we just didn't know what was going to happen day to day. Yeah. Once the lockdown happened, we do our grocery shopping in the morning. It's always well stocked. Like we always find what we need. And, there aren't tons of people there at once. So I have personally found it to be something positive, and that has provided stability in this crazy time.
That's great. Good to hear. Now, you say everything's well stocked. I don't know if I'm guessing you may have heard in the United States, there is no toilet paper to be found. Are you able to at least have some toilet paper?
Ton of toilet paper. Yeah.
I know it's crazy, but it's just one of those things where, I don't know, but.
Yeah, I read somewhere that also the purchases for bidets were just astronomical. Yeah. I don't know why that's such an essential. I just don't know how that's the first thing people go to when they think, but I mean.
They go grab like 50 rolls and like, what are you going to do with it all? So yeah, you think of all things, right? They wouldn't be that, but. when you need it, you kind of need it.
That's very true. I think people just think of like what would happen and don't want to be in that situation. So
people panic and do crazy things. So that's good that hasn't happened for you. You mentioned earlier that the lockdown, you got such short notice, which was, crazy. The next day it happened, and you had mentioned about people deciding to go. Should I leave? What should I do? And now, of course, you're from Florida. I'm guessing you have some family back here in the States. And did you think about, do I need to run back home to the States? Do I need to stay? What was that thought process?
Yeah, I definitely went back and forth on that for a few days. I mean, my work also wanted to send me to Afghanistan because I was meant to go to a mission there. And once they shut down, so basically, my organization categorizes different airports of whether it's like safe to use or not. Mm-hmm. And I was advised not to go through France. So we were trying to think of ways, and then everything just shuts down. I was like, okay, I'm going to be in France. And when I thought about going home, I kind of just pictured all the different ways of transit and, the lack of, at that point, lack of monitoring that was taking place. Like, there was really nothing to assure passengers that they were relatively safe. So I decided to stay for like my safety and then also my family's. My mom's a diabetic and I'm always worrying about her, but I would hate to have been like the cause for someone else getting sick because as we know, youth, having COVID isn't necessarily as dire as someone who is in, one of those vulnerable categories that we've been told about.
Yeah, I mean, it's a real fear rather that you could be an asymptomatic carrier, come home, be there with your family, and then, and if you're in the same house with somebody, the way I see it, it's going to be probably next to impossible to not infect them, right? So sounds like it was a very difficult, very tough decision, but it sounds like you probably made the right one. Are you thinking about maybe when this thing clears to head back home if the first chance you get, or is it just going to be wherever the job takes you?
No, I definitely want to go home. It's just something, just because, I think even not having that option of going home, which I've always had in my line of work, even for a week, and not having that has really, really impacted me. And if I have that opportunity again and knowing it's safe, like I definitely want to see my parents, especially because they're just as worried about me as I am of them. Yeah. So I think, times like this, it kind of puts things in priority. And even though I know that our work will also, be just as important and busy after things subside a bit, I definitely want to take that time to visit my family.
Excellent. I hope you get that chance. So is everyone at home well? So everyone feeling well? No one, everyone doing okay?
Yeah, everyone's doing well.
And have you known any of your friends and do you know anyone that has gotten sick or know of them or anything like that? Because I have a family member who he wasn't tested, but him and his family, they went through something for about 3 weeks, and he's almost 100% sure that's what it was because he was like, I'm sicker than a dog. Didn't go to the doctor, but do you know of anyone that may have gotten the coronavirus?
I actually do know someone. I have a friend here in France, actually, and she was someone who actually had to go back to her hometown. Her father is a doctor, and so he was caring for patients who's one of those frontline workers, that I really give so much praise to. And because she was there with her dad and, just helping him out because he was just working so much, they both ended up getting sick, actually. She is recovering at home. They're both together. Yeah, it was really scary. She's still feeling a bit tired, but that, initial just all the awful symptoms associated, she's feeling much better. But it was definitely scary. And, something I haven't seen discussed as much, but we'll probably see is that stigma that some people may have about it. But, I really just commend her on trying to be there for her father, and I'm glad she's getting better.
Good. That's, oh man, that's tough. And certainly, so you're saying that people that, what, you've been sick now, and then they'll be stigmatized for being sick? Is that the worry, or?
I think, yeah, for some people, I'm glad I'm not seeing it. Like, I'm just amazed by that incredible rush support that I'm seeing on my social media anyway. And that people are really just there for each other and sharing positive messages. So I hope that continues to be the case.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, you're physically okay. How are you coping with this mentally? You've been locked up for 3 weeks. Now, you do kind of have a routine. You mentioned that you provided some kind of a structure. Some people here are starting to go a little bit nuts, being forced to work from home and just being generally confined and not being able to do what they're able to do. Have you been getting any of that stir craziness, or just anything that's like, I'm tired of having to think about this kind of thing?
Yeah, they're definitely, especially when maybe you're still working and you have that stress of work, but at home. I've definitely had to find different ways to just let out my stress, including like
screaming in a pillow, or
maybe fighting with my partner for no reason. But no, we've tried to also find things we can do together that are productive and fun, like cooking. We are cooking so much, and also taking turns in that, so it doesn't feel like a chore, so to speak. Honestly, I've also, my organization are also great in that they provide remote counseling for us if we need it. Sometimes it's just about needing to talk to someone outside of your circle, right, with folks who are kind of going through the same thing. And I found that to be useful as well. And I also, loved to work out before this. Wasn't working out as much as I wanted to before, but I think once that was stripped away, I, kind of took advantage of all these free apps that are going. I think that's awesome that, companies are doing that. So I took advantage of that too. And then also just doing like these little hangout groups with friends and trying to schedule like video calls every once in a while just to catch up.
Oh, those are some great tips. Appreciate that. Have you thought about what you're going to do about your hair? Because I need a haircut, and have you thought about that? I don't know how much farther I can go. Have you contemplated that thing or not? I mean, what you're going to do, like hair, nails, like the normal things you take for granted.
Today was the first day I had to blow dry my hair in a month because I felt I should look presentable for you.
You look great.
During our work calls, it's really just like hoodie attire and a good, bun knot for me. I don't know. I feel like it's also going to be a mad dash to getting a hair appointment, nail appointment, and all these things. So I'm trying to do the best I can, but I appreciate that, work-wise and everything, everyone's in the same boat. So no one's judging anybody else.
All right. So I want to know, to the best of your ability, to the extent that you're sort of confined to a specific place and you can't really go out, and I don't know, to the extent your social network is, but just a general feeling of what's going, just to give everybody watching a sense of what else is going on in Paris and in France and maybe even in Europe. In here, a lot of people lost their jobs. There's some estimates, at least 10 million. It's probably more than that. It's probably closer to 20 million, something like this. So that's what's going on in the United States. They're passing some legislation to help people out, extending unemployment insurance, and they try to help out small businesses so that they don't go under. What's the economic situation in France? I imagine it's probably just as dire.
Yes, like there are a lot of, everything's closed pretty much. I started seeing like an uptick right now in restaurants that are working through, let's say, Uber Eats. But honestly, for the past 3 weeks, everything was shut down. So yes, also a huge hit to small businesses as well. Thank goodness that healthcare wise, France provides healthcare for all their citizens. Yeah. So that's not really a big concern. People are able to access healthcare, which I think is amazing. And I think there's also benefits for those who are out of work as well.
Oh, that's good. So yeah, France has a bit bigger of a social safety net than the United States. So at least hopefully some less people will fall through the cracks, right? Whether it be economic or health. So that's good to hear. I did see today that just before we got on, I said France has the highest number of daily deaths. That came out today or yesterday. I'm not sure. Time difference again. I'm weird with it. There was also reported, coincidentally, New York also had the biggest daily jump in deaths. And then I saw a quote from the health minister who said that France has not reached the peak. We're still in a worsening phase, and this lockdown would go as long as necessary. Is that kind of the feeling on the ground there for you too? That this thing could go basically indefinite?
Yeah, yesterday I believe there were 800 deaths in the day. We try not to watch the news all the time, but when we do, it's very sobering and, scary, but it's that curve, right, that we're discussing, knowing that we haven't reached that peak, but we will, and we have to do all that we can until then. But yeah, I think initially the lockdown was for 2 weeks. And then they extended it for the end of the month in April. Mm-hmm. And people are just kind of going with it because really that's the only thing they can do. They did tighten it today because it's officially spring in Paris. And so yesterday, especially, there were big groups of people outside. Oh, wow. And so now I believe that between 10 a.m. and 7 p.m., you're not allowed to do exercising outside. To try to, rein people in. So,
it's like a habit, right? I mean, you're not used to stay away, you just kind of end up gathering, because you're attracted to the same thing or you kind of end up doing the same thing. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Yeah.
You mentioned the media. Where are you getting your news? Where do you typically find out your information?
So we do catch the local news channel here, for what's going on in France. For what's going on back home, I try to stick to work actually, because we're provided just, technical briefs and things like this that provide us updates of what's happening, especially on a global scale. Yeah. And that helps me also to kind of, not really get into clicking all these different channels and getting these crazy news sources. So I do, read some of the major news sources back home, but I try to stick to actual figures because just like you, I've heard of all these crazy things, these, trials and potential cures, etc. And sometimes it just helps to think about, what do we know for sure and what is my part in all of this? That's kind of the mindset I try to employ while also trying to stay, educated on, what's going on.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Now is the media, as you know, the US media is very sensationalistic. Is the French media similar or is it different?
I think it's a bit different. They're more just these are the facts. The facts are pretty scary, actually. So I don't feel like there is this need to sensationalize, because they're pretty terrifying. And honestly, I feel that there has been clear guidance on, what's happening in the country, how, what are next steps, what is the government doing? And I appreciate that, especially as a foreigner, trying to just get my mind around everything. And I, from people back home, also just because the U.S. is so big and, our states also do things differently, right, that there's just so much more going on.
Were you by chance happen to be contacted by the State Department giving you any advisories or anything since you're overseas? No?
No.
Okay. Well, just letting you hang out to dry, I guess.
Yeah, no, I did ask for a visa extension, and because honestly, I think the guidance they sent out was you can stay and just expect to stay for a long time if you do, or you can go home and it's on you, how to figure out how to get home. So that was pretty much it, and which is why I think I just felt safer staying.
Good. And what has been the reaction by the people to the government with this lockdown, the extent to which they're giving good information that sort of makes sense to everybody? And I mean, are people angry? Are they pissed off that they're under this, or are they sort of generally understanding? I know France is it's a very big protest culture, and even before all this, there was the yellow vest protest and all of that. So a lot of anti-government sentiment. Has that played through this, or have people sort of understood that this is much bigger than whatever our personal differences are?
So from my opinion, and just from what I've observed, in the beginning, the advice from the government was a bit conflicting at times. You're told to stay home, but then they're saying that elections will take place in a week or two, right? And to go to that and things like this. I think, I don't know, what happened in that mindset to shift. Maybe they projected onward and saw that this is going to be what it's going to be. But that shift in the lockdown that I mentioned before from one day to another, after that, I felt that the guidance that was given was very clear. And everything they're doing has felt to be very proactive and just wanting us to get over that peak. I have felt from people who are, native to France, French citizens, that this has been welcomed. And they feel that this has been, helped with having stability. I believe there was one protest, maybe right before the lockdown from the yellow vest, but nothing after, and no protest related to the government response. I would say it's been welcome.
Good. So it's good to hear, because otherwise people, you get mad, you go out in the streets, and you do the exact wrong thing and end up, doing something horrible, like spreading this thing all around the country because, you're just mad at Macron or something like that. Right. So that's good. It's good that because, here, I think people are kind of the same way. The messaging was a bit confusing, and then it's even still not exactly clear. Like I said, for here, I mean, I can go out and essentially do most anything within reason, as long as I'm not in a giant crowd or anything like that. And I think there isn't a clear message from the government yet, either from the county, the state, or the federal government. It's not exactly clear, other than just stay away from people. So I can do that. So I guess at that point. Are you, I got to ask you, are you, what's your level of fear for getting sick? Mine is off the charts. I wear gloves. I sanitize everything that comes in this house. Are you going crazy like me on that, or are you a little more relaxed?
No, I'd say I'm super relaxed. So much that it scared my mother. She's like, "You're not being reckless, are you?" But honestly, we're never within even 12 feet of people, just because everyone is super mindful. There are never too many people out at once. And in terms of, what I touch, we also carry antibacterial gel with us. We wash our hands. We're mindful of doing that, even if we know, our chances are low, just because we're being mindful about these things. So that's why and also because I spend most of my time at home. So I think just knowing that I'm taking all these precautions helps a lot. I would say, my fear mostly lies with people at home.
Great. And Gaby, I want to thank you so much for coming on again. I wanted to see if you've got everyone is a little bit depressed being stuck at home. Either they're worried for themselves or their family, or just the health of their nation. Want people to go back to work. I'd love to hear if you've got any we touched on this a little bit earlier, but any final positive developments, any good stories you want to share, any message of hope that you can give everybody watching.
Yeah, I honestly, what has been the most inspiring, uplifting for me is seeing communities rally around each other. I used to live in New York, and my friends were telling me how, for example, in Astoria, they created this community group where basically they go and they do the grocery shopping for the elderly, and whatever they need, they bring to them. And those who, are not able to go out or who need anything, they're there to support them. We've done the same with our neighborhood association. And, my boyfriend just kind of wanted to post something, and then 20 people posted in an hour saying, I'm willing to help too. Let me know what you need. That's amazing. Everyone who's making masks to help with the shortage. I feel that we need to take comfort in knowing that there are people who are helping. And, that's extraordinary to see. Every little bit counts. And we just kind of have to lean on each other, right? Like you said, like, don't isolate, like physically, sometimes we have to, but don't isolate your feelings, your thoughts, your voice. There are ways to stay connected.
That is absolute gold. Thank you so much, Gaby Pena, for coming on. I want everyone to check out the International Rescue Committee. And Gaby, if you're not shy, if you like people to follow your story, maybe on social media, do you have any of those you like people to check you out in the work you do? Or no? Sorry.
I personally don't have that handle, but the IRC is also on Instagram. Okay. If you want to check out some of the stories that, we're doing and what's happening on the ground, please check that out. There are some really amazing things happening right now.
Excellent. Gaby, be well. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Hi, Dave back again. Hope you enjoyed our chat. I want to say thank you again to Gaby Pena for sharing her thoughts. I'm going to give my kind of takeaway after reflecting a little bit on our chat. It's very interesting, the contrast, I think, between from what I heard coming out of China and then what I heard coming out of France. And of course, we've all know about this curve, right? And we've talked about it. And what you really want is to, you get up here, the infections grow and grow and grow and get up to the top, and then you finally sort of peak, crescendo, and go down. And China is in this end point here where they're almost out of it. And Lauren mentioned how Shanghai really wasn't hit that hard. It was only in a couple of hundreds. And meanwhile, France is not quite at the peak, as we talked about. The health minister said they're not there yet, but they're probably getting pretty close. And then the U.S. is just a couple of weeks behind that. So I felt like, well, one, the experience that Gaby shared coming out of France was more relatable, one that I think we're all about to head through. And then that reality kind of hits that we still have a ways to go. It's been about 3 weeks of lockdown for her, which means we might see another 2-3 weeks here of where we are right now. So it's kind of maybe having to deal with that kind of reality. And that being isolated like that, it tends to make people go crazy, particularly when all the routines have been upset and you can't kind of do the normal things that you like to do, go out and do different stuff, even if, something as simple as going out and getting a bite to eat or sitting at a restaurant out there by the beach or something. And that's your way of sort of unwinding, getting connected to the world, that sort of thing. When you can't do these things anymore and you feel like you're cooped up, you start going crazy, particularly if you've lost your job or if you have a health situation, if you yourself have gotten sick, somebody you know has gotten sick, somebody in your family is dealing with a crisis. It's really hard on all of us and weighs us all down. So Gaby had some great tips of some advice, and it's really just to be not afraid to reach out. Don't be embarrassed. We're all going through something here. And maybe it's about, we're physically socially distanced, but maybe we need to re-engage mentally. And we have all these great tools. I mean, Gaby and I talked from, a continent away across the Atlantic Ocean, and we had a good time. I think I felt some positivity from that. And I think she got something out of it too. And I hope all of you watching also got that. Everybody needs some kind of help. Reach out to somebody, contact them. Just even if you don't need something, just ask them if they need something. Go ahead and reach out. Hey friend, hey neighbor, hey family member, how you doing? Do you need anything? Even if it's just a couple of words of encouragement, it's amazing what even just a good laugh can do for somebody. So thank you, Gaby, so much for showing us a way forward. Thanks for watching.